When was the last time you wanted to watch a movie about suicide during Christmas? Such a film would feel out of place with the happy feelings and nostalgia we associate with that time of year. But in essence, It's a Wonderful Life is a film about suicide, a brutally honest one. In a time when people are thinking about Christmas dinner, presents, and mistletoe, this film throws a curveball into that warm and fuzzy picture, and somehow it makes it work really well. This film explores a struggle that all of us have experienced at some point, myself included. This is not just a Christmas movie. This is the story of a man who risks it all and loses everything. Does he commit suicide in the end? You'll just have to watch to find out. The movie opens with people praying for a man named George Bailey. This man is very important to the story we are about to experience. The story takes place in a small town, and we see everyone praying for this man who's on the verge of taking his own life. We then move to the sky, and we see two heavenly beings discussing what to do about George Bailey.
At exactly 10:45 p.m. Earth time, that man will be thinking seriously of throwing away God's greatest gift.
Right out of the gate, this movie states its opening theme. Suicide robs you of God's greatest gift of life itself. We're also introduced to the main character, George Bailey.
What'd you stop it for?
I want you to take a good look at that face.
Who is it?
George Bailey.
This man has one of the greatest emotional U-turns I've ever seen in film, and this opening already tells us a little bit of where this movie is headed. The movie isn't going to beat around the bush.
Over here, in the hydrangea bushes.
This is the story of a man who is so deep into despair that he is about to take his own life. And this resonates with me because at one point in the past, I've also experienced these things. And even if some of you haven't, this theme still hits home because everyone struggles with self-worth and has experienced dark times. If anything, I think the holiday season amplifies those feelings even more because it's a time that is supposed to be full of joy. So when we see movies like this, they feel out of place. And as a little side note, as a Christian filmmaker, I really appreciate how the opening of this film simultaneously introduces a profound theme and grounds it in a spiritual tone without being preachy.
Hey, Scotty. Jesus, man.
Believe it or not, even though this movie is considered a Christmas classic, the story doesn't really focus on Christmas. But the darkest scene in the movie takes place in what would otherwise be considered a jovial holiday. So let's dive into George Bailey and how he got to such a dark place.
Dear Father in heaven, show me the way.
This movie hammers home one quality about George that we never forget. Without this one thing, nothing else in this movie would have happened. In fact, it's so out of place that nobody else in his town really has this character trait. So what is it? George has a strong desire to travel the world. At first glance, this desire that George has seems superficial, but if you've stuck around on this channel long enough, as a modern parable crafter, you would know that sometimes the simple things can often be the most profound. The angels then take us through a brief flashback of George growing into a young man. We see his desire to travel grow into something more tangible, or even desperate.
Mary, I know what I'm going to do tomorrow and the next day and next year and a year after that. I'm shaking the dust of this crummy little town off my feet and I'm going to see the world.
His desire to travel and leave his hometown of Bedford Falls is both a blessing and a curse. He knows exactly what he wants from a young age, something I can't say for most of my peers. But he also has one other very important trait. He's selfless to a fault. As we walk through his childhood, we see both idealism and sacrifice, the desire to travel and sacrificing it to serve others. He constantly puts others before himself, sacrificing his dreams, his time, and money for the sake of holding people together. In just the first 10 minutes, this film has managed to not only get me invested in this character, but also masterfully introduce the main theme and conflict of this story. It's so well done that you don't even notice the exposition you're taking in. You can easily suspend belief because everything is integrated so seamlessly. But this is where everything begins to go wrong, because one character throws a wrench into George's idealistic world.
That's Henry F. Potter, the richest and meanest man in the county.
With our main hero introduced, it's only fair that we give him a villain to battle, and that comes in the form of Henry F. Potter, a very rich and very mean-spirited man. His entire goal is to ensnare the town of Bedford Falls and squash anything or anyone that gets in his way. Want to guess who gets in Potter's way? That's right, George Bailey. George was the only one who stood up to Potter, and it quickly grew into a heated rivalry, one that will determine the fate of the town. Remember earlier how I said George wants to see the world? When Potter arrived on the scene, George's fate was uncertain because he knew he couldn't just leave the town to crumble underneath Potter's iron grip, a grip that would soon turn the town into a bleak metropolis if George wasn't there to stop him. But if that's all that happened, the film would be pretty uninteresting. But it does get darker, and within that darkness is a thread of hope. This hope is introduced by way of two characters, Clarence, George's guardian angel, and Mary, his childhood sweetheart. Clarence officially arrives later in the film, so let's take a moment to focus on Mary. She is single-handedly one of the most important side characters in this film. In a world filled with darkness, she brings a glimmer of hope into George's life. And I think you see where I'm going with this. George and Mary have one of the most wholesome and hopeful romances I've seen in a long time. Mary brings a sense of hope into George's otherwise cynical and dark world. And we'll come back to her later, because she ends up playing an instrumental role in George's redemption.
Mr. and Mrs. Martini, welcome home.
Jumping forward a bit, the now married couple create a new part of town in an attempt to pull people out from Potter's grasp.
Dozens of the prettiest little homes you ever saw. 90% owned by suckers who used to pay rent to you.
Potter is fuming when he hears about this, and he decides he has no choice but to incapacitate George completely. The camera slowly moves in as we see the gears turning in Potter's mind. Whatever he's planning, it's gonna hit George where it hurts. And we don't have to wait long to find out what that is.
Bailey family's been a boil on my neck long enough.
Potter calls George to his office, and what they discuss next changes everything.
You have been stopping me. And as anyone in this county can tell you, that takes some doing.
Well, what's your point, Mr. Potter?
The point is, I want to hire you. I'll start you out at $20,000 a year.
No, wait a minute here. You sit around here and you spin your little webs and you think the whole world revolves around you and your money. Well, it doesn't, Mr. Potter.
This is where George feels despair tightening, and it's about to get even worse. With no one else to stand up against Potter, George's fate is now sealed as the sole protector of Bedford Falls. But Potter's words haunt him because he knows he's powerless. Potter has leverage that George doesn't have. We continue on as one of the angels narrates. They are still watching over him, and when the time comes, George's guardian angel will take the lead.
Now you've probably already guessed that George never leaves Bedford Falls.
It's now winter, and with Christmas around the corner, everyone in Bedford Falls is in good spirits. Even George himself. George has a loving family, a supportive wife, and a community of wonderful people. But what he didn't know was that everything was about to change.
Carter, bank examiner. I trust you had a good year.
Well, between you and me, Mr. Carter, we're broke.
George's business owes a hefty $8,000 to the bank, but in the middle of the confusion, George's uncle loses the money, or rather misplaces it, and then Potter steals it. What started as a simple mistake quickly unravels the last thread holding George together. We see him begin to panic once his uncle tells him that he lost the money. George realizes that this could be the end of them. The business will be bankrupt, the bank will ask for his arrest, and Potter will win. Things are spiraling down quicker than he could imagine.
You realize what this means? It means bankruptcy and scandal and prison. That's what it means. One of us is going to jail. Well, it's not going to be me.
He knows that Potter finally has what he wants. His most fierce rival is now backed into a corner. At the beginning, we saw a man with a fierce desire to travel the world, a world full of wonder and adventure. But now that same man is no longer recognizable, crushed by the greed of a warped old man. Even in this, a thread of hope begins to appear, a small prayer as the world collapses around them.
Is Daddy in trouble?
Yes, Pete.
Shall I pray for him?
Yes, Jenny, pray very hard.
Mary urges the children to pray for their father. Even in the midst of these tumultuous events full of uncertainty, her hope and determination stand firm. But even while they pray for George, their father, for him, this is where the darkness creeps in even further. With the $8,000 now in Potter's possession, he has the upper hand, and he knows it. He knows that George will have nobody else to turn to but his wealthy rival for help. And when George does come pleading, Potter's next actions are what propel this movie into its darkest point yet. So with nowhere else to go, George turns to his rival Potter for help. And if you think Potter can't possibly get any worse, buckle up, because his next words are what thrust George into the darkest part of the movie.
I've got to raise $8,000 immediately. Please help me, Mr. Potter.
You once called me a warped, frustrated old man. What are you with a warped, frustrated young man? You're worth more dead than alive.
And this is where the story takes a turn for the worse. Coming back to the theme of suicide we've been building up to. Desperation is now gone. Despair has set in. George sits there in shock as Potter berates him for his foolishness. The cold claws of inevitability are closing around him. His family, business, even the fate of the town are now in Potter's hands. A simple backhanded insult is what shatters George's already frail hope into a million pieces. The man we know as George Bailey is done for. This turning point resonates with me because this film makes it so personal. It could apply to any of us watching at home as much as it does to George Bailey. I think we often feel insufficient or anxious about events that are out of our control, and we feel powerless to do anything. And sometimes this sense of impending failure is so palpable that you feel backed into a corner with little options. Potter is the one that constantly comes between George and the town, and he is the person who delivers that final, devastating blow. You're worth more dead than alive. And George feels he has failed in every way possible.
I'm going to swear out a warrant for your arrest.
So with little else to do, George flees the room. He flees as far away from Potter as possible, ending up at the local bar. Finally, the gravity of it all sets in, and George weeps at the table. With nothing else to do, he does the only thing he can think of in that moment, and prays.
Dear Father in heaven, I'm not a praying man, but if you're up there and you can hear me, show me the way.
James Stewart, the actor for the character of George, was a World War II veteran, a fighter pilot, and may very well have prayed something similar during his missions. When life gets dark and you feel like there's no escape, sometimes you just want to cry out for somebody, anybody, to pull you out of the mess. So unless you have a heart of stone, this moment will impact you big time. I know it did for me. Seeing George in this state of pure desperation is just heartbreaking. His prayer at the bar feels painfully real. He has nowhere else to go, and sooner or later, the police will find him, and the story of the quaint Bedford Falls will end. And Potter will finally get what he wants. But little does George know that his prayer had more power than he realized. However, oblivious to it all and stuck in the mires of despair, he finally decides what he's going to do. He quietly leaves the bar and slowly makes his way over to the bridge. As he peers below him, he can see the cold winter river rushing beneath him, a gentle sprinkle of snow falling in the air. George is about to commit suicide. Back at the beginning of the film, we saw two angels discuss George Bailey, after which they decide to send an angel named Clarence to help him. But George isn't aware of any of this. In this moment, he's ready to say goodbye to it all. His wife, his children, the town, and his dreams to travel. All gone in one jump. He takes one last look at the river beneath him, and just when he's about to leap, something unexpected happens. His little prayer at the bar is about to come to fruition. In a stroke of genius, George's guardian angel Clarence takes advantage of George's selfless character and jumps into the river and feigns drowning, at which point George jumps in to save him. Even at the precipice of committing suicide, George's sacrificial values take over as he jumps into the river to save Clarence.
You didn't go through with it, did you?
Go through with what?
Suicide.
I'm worth more dead than alive. I suppose it'd been better if I'd never been born at all.
What'd you say?
I said I wish I'd never been born.
Wait a minute, that's an idea. You've got your wish. You've never been born.
And with that, Clarence grants George his wish. He has never been born. George is oblivious to what Clarence just changed, and he storms out to find his wife and kids. He walks through town, but everything is different, shockingly so. What starts as confusion quickly turns into horror as the events unfold before him. And this is where the nightmare begins. Bedford Falls, the once welcoming town, has changed for the worse. Because George wasn't alive to stop him, Potter has won, and he's turned it into a sinner's paradise.
Then why am I seeing all these strange things?
Don't you understand, George? It's because you were not born.
Well, if I wasn't born, who am I?
You're nobody. You've been given a great gift, George. A chance to see what the world would be like without you.
At first, George is disbelieving. He doesn't think what he's seeing is real. But what happens next shocks him to his core.
Just tell me where my wife is.
She's an old maid. She never married.
Mary, the loving and supportive wife he'd married, doesn't even know him in this horrible alternate reality. And at that moment, George finally puts the pieces together. Clarence is not showing him a fantasy, but the truth, what the world would look like without him. The quiet and idyllic town of Bedford Falls has become a vision of hell. In this alternate reality, Potter has won. After seeing all of this, George finally understands. He had never realized how much good he had until he suddenly lost it. The moment of realization and gratitude from George when he comes back from the alternate reality is one of the most notable emotional U-turns in cinema. From sorrow to gratitude, from tragedy to miracle, joy that was born out of the depths of despair.
Help me, Clarence! Get me back to my wife and kids!
I want to live again.
This movie strikes me as deeply personal. It strikes at the core of our identity. Am I valuable? It's a Wonderful Life answers with a resounding yes, a reminder we need but rarely think about. This movie teaches us that every person's life carries immeasurable worth. Human life has profound value, and you have no idea what impact your life will have on others. And ultimately, God can use our darkest moments and pain to mature us into even better people and impact those around us. Our pain and growth can become the catalyst for inspiring others. In many ways, this movie showcases a character with high ideals, which, in my opinion, is not a bad thing at all. I think the ideal is something we ought to strive for, in art, in relationships, in architecture, everything. And as a Christian, I believe that there's something beautiful in the ideal, because beauty reflects our Creator. But this is not a one-dimensional film. The story, while filled with fun beats and enjoyable moments, also covers one of the darkest themes we can relate to, and I would go even as far to say that it more than pulls its own weight in the 21st century. In fact, it's had such a great impact that a festival is hosted every year in its honor. But the story doesn't end there. The town rallies to help George raise money to pay the enormous debt to the bank. Potter's plan to ruin George is about to end.
Mary! Well, hello, Mr. Bank Examiner.
George! George, darling. Quick, they're on their way.
All right.
Come in, Uncle Billy. Everybody in here.
George!
Remember how I said we'd come back to George's wife? She's one of the key pieces here. Without her reaching out to the town and asking them to help, nothing else would have clicked into place. The wife who saw George give everything to save the town is now the one who saves the day by rallying that town to help pay off his debt. And without the divine intervention of God through Clarence, George wouldn't be standing in front of them. In many ways, I think this film is profoundly religious, with many references to God, angels, and prayer. But these things aren't hit over your head. They're woven organically into the story, laying the groundwork for the theme early in the film. At last, the movie comes to a close as George reads a note from Clarence. No man is a failure who has friends. Movies that make an impact ask quiet yet profound questions. How would life look if I didn't exist is one we've all asked at some point. And this film forces us to examine ourselves and inspires true gratitude for God's greatest gift of life itself. George learns that his life has meaning, not because of his success or failure, but because of the life and faith he's surrounded by. In fact, the movie never tells us if he fulfills his dream of traveling the world. The best thing that we can do as artists is bring people on a journey of questions and let them answer them. For my part, I walked away from this movie with much more gratitude for the life I've been given. Christmas isn't really a time we think about watching dark movies, but maybe, just maybe, it's the perfect time for them because they cause us to reflect on the good that we have been given. Sometimes all you need is a shift in perspective, and this movie does just that. May you have a wonderful Christmas. Stay creative. God bless.
Toast to my big brother George, the richest man in town.